Welcome to On the Fly College Edition, a podcast presented by Playfly Sports. I'm your host, Gene Defilippo. Playfly Sports is the full-service marketing and media company bringing digitally enabled innovations to the sports industry. Welcome to On the Fly. I'm your host, Gene Defilippo, and today our guest on the Fly is the very successful commissioner of the West Coast Conference, Gloria Nevarez. And she has a terrific story. So all of you young administrators, old administrators, whomever you might be, Gloria has a lot to offer. So this is going to be a wonderful podcast. Hi, Gloria.
Hello, Gene. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for making time to be on this podcast. I really appreciate it. You know, you come so highly recommended, and everybody says that you are just terrific at what you do. And so I'm excited for women across the country to hear you and your story and how you got there. And there's so many males out here too that want to learn from you. So this is going to be a great podcast. I know your background, I know you, but take us from college, from your days at the University of Massachusetts, and tell us about the climb on the ladder and how you got to where you were. I think it's a really interesting story.
Well, it started about 100 years ago when I was at UMass playing basketball, and I had the opportunity to major in sport management. Rather newish field, at least in the undergraduate space at the time. And as most college athletes, didn't have a lot of time to build a resume. So after graduation, I came home, took a gap year, worked in a law firm in the basement, filing papers, non-glamorous work, and decided I should go to law school. So I lucked out and got into UC Berkeley Law School. And about my second year, I realized I don't know if I really want to practice law. I love sport. I miss sport. Is there some way to combine the two? So I walked down the road to their athletic department, and they had one compliance person for 27 sports and 950 athletes. This was
Wow.
Right? Can you imagine? This was the beginning of compliance. Now,
Wow.
Programs like that have 8 to 10, all with law degrees, working in their compliance programs. And because he was an attorney, he was able to sign off for externship credit for me during my last year of law school. So it really worked out well. I got a lot of hands-on experience and ended up saying, you know what? I had a cup of coffee in a labor litigation firm and came right back out and said, I want to be in college athletics. Dr. Charles Whitcomb at San Jose State hired me as their first full-time compliance person. It was surreal. Recruiting logs were kept in a drawer by the water polo coach. It was just it was way back. So worked there for a couple of years, built the program. The guy who helped me out at Cal by giving me externship credit, he moved on. I ended up taking his place, became the compliance person at Cal. Was there for a couple of years, and then ended up looking at the West Coast Conference. And I did my first stint as an assistant commissioner in the West Coast Conference, a little bit of everything. We were the smallest Division I league at the time, 8 full-time folks. And then I got to serve on Dr. Brand, president of the NCAA, had a diversity and inclusion committee. And one of the gentlemen I had the pleasure of working with on a subcommittee was named Joe Castiglione, who's the athletic director at the University of Oklahoma. And I really when you meet Joe, you know it. He's just good people, really clicked. And I saw in the ticker one of his senior associates left. And so I wrote him a note and said, hey, Joe, you're on the short list of guys I'd ever want to work for. If you think there's a fit, here's my resume. And I think it was like 2 months later, I was moving to Norman, Oklahoma.
Wow.
One of the best jobs. My first year there, we went to a champ game with Sam Bradford in football. We went to an Elite 8 with Blake Griffin in men's basketball and a Final Four with women's basketball and Courtney, the Paris twins, led by Courtney Paris. So it was just surreal. And an amazing experience. But then the search firms and the Pac-12 came calling about coming back. I'm from California Bay Area and being part of Larry Scott's senior leadership team. And so it was a great opportunity, especially to get back to the West Coast where my family and roots were, and to really be part of something new and different. In my first 2-3 years at the Pac-12, we added 2 schools. We created a football champ game. We moved both basketball tournaments, women up to Seattle, men to Las Vegas. We took teams internationally. I took teams to China, an all-star team to Australia. We had a little kerfuffle with one of the teams when some student athletes decided to steal some sunglasses, but that was
I remember that incident. We won't mention the school, but that was an interesting incident.
I was on the advanced team and spent a lot of quality time learning the Chinese legal system. And, 8 years later, we built a network. I mean, it was fantastic. I had so many fond memories of my time at the PAC. And then search firms came calling again, and the WCC job opened up. And I love this league. I loved it from the first. I knew it from my first time around. There's such great alignment. And I think, for me, to be able to work at a league this size, because most of my career has been at large FBS, Power 5 institutions, was that despite our size and scope, we win. We vie for national titles in pretty much every sport we decide to compete in, and it's not the same 1 or 2 teams or same gender every time. So it's really, really special. And
it's a terrific league.
Yeah.
I mean, when you take Gonzaga and St. Mary's, Brigham Young, Loyola, and San Francisco, Pepperdine, it's just a great school. It's a mix of private schools and and some state schools. It's just a great league.
Well, and they're all private, but I will tell you,
I'm sorry.
My travel footprint is pretty fantastic. San Diego, LA, Bay Area, Utah, Seattle, and Portland. I mean, come on.
They're great schools, both academically and athletically. All right. Everybody wants to know how Gonzaga can be in the top 3, 4, 5 basketball programs in the country almost every year. What's the secret potion?
And if I were to sum it up and oversimplify it, I think this is symbolic of our league, but certainly I think is one of the founding principles of why Gonzaga has been so good is alignment. They are aligned from their president to their athletic director, athletic staff, to the coach, coaching staff, and student athletes. And they started this build 20 years ago. I mean, there's a lot of great articles and books about how Gonzaga was, as an institution, not even just athletics, was, kind of on the verge of survival. But president, AD, coach were all aligned about doing what it took to really make successful athletic programs, starting with men's basketball. And even as there really hasn't been key turnover in those positions, but when there were turnover in some key positions, folks came in and were aligned with the mission that was set out 2 decades ago. And I just think they've created such a special thing there with both their basketball programs, because Gonzaga used that success for men's basketball to have all boats rise. Their women's teams, basketball teams, are doing really good, and their other sports used to be bottom of the league in just about everything, and now they're competitive, top half in most.
Great story. Gloria, what advice would you give to a young person, say yourself? What advice would you give to yourself at the start of your career?
So much is made of titles of both your individual position and maybe the brand cachet of the school. And while those things are really, really important, I would say, especially as you're starting out, do the job, learn the job, do it well. Even those pieces that don't feel to you as rewarding or maybe as sexy or get as much public attention, they will pay off in large part because learning the industry, learning the job is going to set you up to be successful later.
Great. Very good. You know, I know as I was coming up, if I were to give myself some advice, it would be continue to work hard. I think I'd have more confidence in myself and God, if I continued to work, I was going to move up the ladder. And I think I would have enjoyed the process more than I did. I was so driven at times that I probably didn't enjoy the process as much as I needed to. And so, in just thinking about it, what advice I'd give to myself, it would be keep working hard, have more confidence in yourself and God that you're going to get to where you are, and enjoy every day. It took me a while to figure it out, Gloria, but anyway, that would be my advice.
Yeah.
You've been around so many great leaders in so many different leagues and so many different presidents and athletic directors. What are some of the characteristics that the great leaders have that make them great leaders?
You know, and maybe this is a reflection of me dealing with the current COVID issues, but when I find myself calling my mentors and calling my like inner circle of board of directors on tough decisions, largely what they have in common is sticking to their core mission and values, sticking to, you know, the true mission of the institution and what's best for student athletes, and really being thoughtful and deliberative, and, you know, not weighing all factors equally, not getting too hung up on how this is going to play publicly, or, you know, factors that might be a little bit adrift from the core mission and values. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying that's what I find, you know, when I call Joe Castiglione or a Chris Plonsky, or, you know, trying to that always come to center, and what are you trying to achieve? What is the mission you're trying to fulfill, and how do your decisions fall into that?
Good. Really, really good. The job of a commissioner today is extremely different than it was 15, 20 years ago. There's also a lot more pressure on directors of athletics and conference commissioners than there was years ago. What do you do, you know, for recreation, and how do you deal with the everyday stresses that we all face in intercollegiate athletics?
Well, just to uh, illustrate that point a little bit, Gene, I was just in a CCA meeting, which is the Collegiate Commissioners Association. It's the 32 Division I commissioners of all the leagues, and someone circulated a list of tenure, of the rank order by tenure of all the commissioners. I'm in my fourth year. I'm already at the top of the middle third. We've
Wow.
got 4 or 5 new commissioners that are on the list but have negative months next to their name because they've been announced, signed contracts, but they haven't yet really officially started and taken over the mantle, but yet they're in meetings and getting caught up to speed. So it's unreal, the level of turnover. I think this pandemic has really amplified that about these jobs. They are difficult. I still enjoy it. To your point, I think having fun, enjoying what you do is important. When COVID hit, my husband and I moved up to South Lake Tahoe, which is about 3 hours from the Bay Area. And so we do a lot of hiking and skiing, and we adopted 87 pounds of German Shepherd love for culture. And he's been a real, he's been a nice addition to the stress relief.
That's great. Do you play golf? Do you?
I
know you
used
hike,
to.
you do some things. Do you play golf?
Used to, don't have time anymore. More about the, you know, downhill skiing and scuba diving and travel.
Wow, that sounds like fun. That sounds like fun. You know, you've had so many successes. You know, people ask me sometimes when I was a director of athletics, you know, what are some of the successes that you've had? And I would say, you know, of course, winning a national championship in several sports was great, particularly ice hockey, and beating Notre Dame 5 times in a row in football. But one of the more one of the things that really excited me was we had a young man by the name of Peter Spalding who became the first Rhodes Scholar in Boston College's history. And that to me was really special. You've had all kinds of success, but what are some of the most rewarding things that you have had happen to you or with you as you've been coming through the climbing the ladder?
You know, when you talk about successes, the dirty little secret a lot of people don't know, our conference commissioners don't have that much legitimate authority. We are consensus builders. We are driven by votes of our board or votes of our athletic director. So it's really about pulling people together, finding solutions that all 10 can agree to, or at least the majority can agree to. I think one of the proudest moments of my career was the adoption of the Russell Rule by the 10 presidents in our league.
Right.
Explain
that rule, please, because that's a great rule.
After the murder of George Floyd, the nation was very focused on social justice issues, Black Lives Matter movement. And as institutions of higher education, our presidents and athletic directors really wanted to do something more than just put out a statement, more than just do an educational training session, both of which we did. But they wanted an initiative that created meaningful and lasting change. And so we came up with the concept of this hiring commitment. And, it took a lot of work and it took a lot of behind the scenes, what are your concerns about it? Where do you want to go with it? Legal, HR. But ultimately, everybody leaned into this and we ended up adopting this in about 2 or 3 months. And we haven't released our first year of data yet. A lot of learning, a lot of scrubbing, a lot of trying to figure out, make sure we're absolutely on point. But the stories behind the first year of the commitment are really strong. And I do believe the sample size is too small to declare a success, but I do think we've taken the first path on a very positive path. First step on a very positive path.
Can you explain a little bit more in depth about the rule?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So the Russell Rule at heart is a hiring commitment. So any full-time opening in your department must include a candidate of a historically unrepresented background in the final candidate pool. Now, this is purposely broad because in the college athletic space, women virtually do not coach any men's teams. So if you interview a woman for a coaching position on a men's team, you would satisfy this rule. Most of our schools are religious-based schools. So diversity of religion could also be included in some of these conversations. But by and large, out of the 85 or so hires over the course of the year, 90-something% of them, and again, we're still scrubbing data, met the Russell Rule, high 90s, and half of those jobs were actually filled with the candidate from the unrepresented class. So that it really exceeded my expectations as far as the hire through rate, because you don't have to hire the candidate. It's about getting a robust, diverse finalist pool.
That's great. Being from Boston, Bill Russell was always one of my very favorites. He just turned 88 the other day. And when you talk about GOATs, and everybody has their own GOAT, you really have to think about a guy that won 9 championships in 10 years and then 2 more as a coach. He, to me, during his time, he was the greatest basketball player that I saw.
And it was really, in formulating this rule, we had these awful titles, WCC, diversity and hiring commitment, just awful. You couldn't even acronym them. They were just bureaucratic and long. And then one of the guys in our shop, Zach Smith, said, you know what, we should call this the Russell Rule. And boom, of course, he's a USF grad. He took University of San Francisco to their national title games. He not only was the first African American head coach in the NBA, but out of any of the four big professional sports, first African American coach, period. And his whole life committed to social justice and fighting for social justice issues. It just seemed like the perfect alignment. And didn't want to, use his name without consulting with him. So it took a little bit to connect with him. And at one point, I just thought, oh, should we just go ahead and use the bureaucratic name? And the guys on my team were like, no, let's pump the brakes. Let's put in the work. Let's connect with Bill. And it was just one of my fangirl moments was actually being able to talk to Bill Russell on the phone and have him agree to put his name on this. It was just, yeah.
That's such a great thing. I mean, think what he did. He and Casey Jones won back-to-back NCAA championships. Then they went on and they won an Olympic gold medal. And then the two of them came to the Celtics and won 9 championships in 10 years, I think it was.
Right.
What a career. I don't believe that anybody's done that before, but I don't know. Maybe they have. Let me ask you this, because this is an interesting question that always came up for me. Let's just imagine that, Gloria, you're hiring a deputy commissioner and you have some very, very good candidates and you're down to the final 2 candidates and they're very, very close in qualifications. How would you make the final decision as to whom you're going to hire?
And again, I think, well, diversity is very important and close to my heart. It's not an easy button. It's not always pick the diverse candidate. You really have to look at what do you need from this position and what do you need from your organization? Like right now, we're only a staff of 15, but we're largely female. So at any point in time, could hiring men bring in diversity that we might need in our office? Or perhaps, if you're looking at a national level position, is geography a piece of diversity you would consider? Now, I do believe race and gender have been 2 areas that have not had full opportunity, perhaps, and not been able to fill out the ranks of college athletics administration, perhaps as they normally would, as reflected in the population and other industries. So that is high on my radar quite often if we're low in that area in the shop. But I tend to, the scenario you set up is all other factors being equal. If diversity was a factor that I needed in my shop, then that would take the day on my final decision of the candidate.
Good. Really good answer. I'm going off track here now. Is Gloria, I knew you'd be great. You've been unbelievable. Is there something that you would like to say? Is there an area that's very important to you that you'd like to say that I could ask you that question and give you an opportunity to say what you would like to say?
I think we're at a tipping point in college athletics, as evidenced by, and COVID probably accelerated it or maybe put a brighter spotlight on it. But we're going through transformational change right now. And the NCAA has a committee, which I have the pleasure of serving on, called the Transformation Committee. And I think I would like to see the NCAA that I've grown up in had the student athletes, health and well-being at core, graduation, leaving the academy with a degree. And I just hope that through all this change, we don't lose sight of those fundamental principles, because I myself highly value the athletic experience. It wasn't always positive, but it formed me into the professional that I am today. And I think that it was a very special opportunity to have played college sports. And I wasn't that good. I was a bench warmer, but still, I think it's a valuable experience. And so in all the litigation and all the name, image, likeness, the pay for play debates and arguments, I just hope at core, we keep those fundamental aspects, student athlete first, academic pursuits in the DNA of who we are.
That's why you and I got into it. That's why we got into this. I wanted to be like my coach, who had such an influence on my life. And I thought, if I could do that for other people, wow, that would be really neat. But it's certainly changing out there. The other thing is, with all private institutions in your league, you are probably one of the conferences, or some of the schools who might be approached by a group trying to unionize student athletes, as they are at USC right now and UCLA. But private institutions are more susceptible. And so I'm sure that you and your athletic directors and your presidents are on the cutting edges of what's going on. How do we want to handle this? Who do we want to be? And all the things that go with it.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about the case with USC and UCLA is they have one private school and one public school, because National Labor Relations Policy applies to private institutions. But by arguing that they're both under a common employer, being the conference, they are extending the definition of, should student athletes be employees, across into the public sector. So, of course, we're watching that very closely. I think there are a lot of cases out there that we're watching very closely. But what I do appreciate and enjoy about the WCC is I think we're in a good position, however this falls out. I think we're funded well enough not to go out of business and to be able to react to wherever this may take us, but we're also committed enough in the value of the college athletic experience that we're going to figure out how to continue to survive and advance. Because let's face it, the playing field between the bigs and leagues like ours have been unequal for some time, and we've continued to survive and win. And not just win, but really take home some hardware from the national office.
And win and graduate student athletes with a meaningful degree.
Absolutely.
And that's what it's all about. Gloria, you've been terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene.
For making time to be part of this podcast. There's a lot of young administrators and coaches out there that are going to listen to this podcast. We'll put it on LinkedIn. We'll have it in the D1 ticker. We'll take bits and pieces of some of the things that you said, and we'll make smaller sound bites and we'll put them out there. But you're doing a terrific job. You're changing lives. And thank you for making time to be on this podcast.
Thank you so much, Gene. And thank you for the kind words, because mid-February is probably one of the toughest months for us basketball leagues, because everyone's, wired up. We're not yet at our tournament. Folks are a little tired. Add on some COVID, and whew, can we just get to the other side of our tournament?
And you know what? I always found that the last part of the season was very difficult. It was difficult for the student athletes. It was difficult for the coaches. The referees were tired.
Everyone's tired.
Because some of them are a little bit older than the athletes, and everybody is tired at this time. And then all of a sudden we get to the tournament and we get a second wind and we're ready to go again. And that's what makes it so much fun.
I'm looking forward to that second win for sure.
Yeah. Hey, good luck to you and all the teams in your conference, men, women, everybody. Continued success.
Thank you, Gene. You take care.
All right. Bye, Gloria. Well, that concludes today's podcast. I want to thank Gloria Nevarez for making time to be with us. She's a terrific administrator and has done a wonderful, wonderful job with that West Coast Conference. We're out of time on this week's On the Fly College Edition. I'm your host, Gene Defilippo. Thanks for your time this time, and we'll see you next time.